Now is the British High Commissioner. Over 70 years after the establishment of the European Union, the United Kingdom is the first country to demand an exit. This decision is a direct consequence of a referendum where 52% of the population voted leave over the 48% that voted remain. Nigeria is a Commonwealth nation affiliated with the United Kingdom, and as a result, the aftermath of Brexit may have direct implications. To speak on this, amongst other things, is the British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Catriona Laing. Welcome.
Thank you.
Madam Ambassador, good to see you.
Oh, it's
yes,
wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yes, you had my introduction. Nigerians are so concerned about Brexit. It's a subject we discuss every day on this program because of the very close historical, cultural, affinity between Nigeria and the United Kingdom. Now we have an extension till October 31. What do you see likely to happen in terms of the negotiations between the government and the House of Commons? And what should be our worst fears as Nigerians or even as Africans who have very close connection with the United Kingdom?
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and it's a great pleasure to be here. Brexit is obviously a hugely important topic for us, for Europe and for the world indeed. It's the first time a member state has requested to leave. As you said, we had a referendum. It was very well supported in terms of the number of voters who turned out to vote, and it was very tight. And it's therefore been quite challenging for our Prime Minister to navigate a way through this. And what I would say is, from a positive perspective, this is democracy in action. We don't have a dictatorship in the UK. The Prime Minister can't just state that we are now leaving. There's a process, and Parliament has its voice in this process. And what she has been doing recently is reached out to the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, to see if they can find a compromise to take back to Parliament to vote again. So we are grateful to the European Union for agreeing to an extension. They've granted us a 6-month extension, but the Prime Minister remains committed herself to try and complete this process earlier than that, by the end of June. If she's able to do that, then we wouldn't need to take part in the European elections. But it's going to be tight, and it's complicated, and it raises a lot of emotions. People feel very strongly. But she's hopeful that she can reach a compromise with Jeremy Corbyn, take that back to Parliament, and complete our Brexit process in an orderly fashion. In terms of fears, I think, rather than fears, I think there are opportunities. The positive side of Brexit, and one of the drivers behind it, is a desire for Britain, as a proud island nation, to take its place on the world stage. And as we saw in the Commonwealth Summit last year, that means re-establishing and strengthening our historical relationships with Commonwealth countries, Nigeria in particular. One of the reasons the Prime Minister came here last year, and we had a visit from Prince Charles, is that Nigeria is, in Africa at least, our #1 most important relationship. And post-Brexit, I just see that going from strength to strength. So an opportunity rather than fears, I would say.
Well, let's talk about immigration and application, because we have quite the number of Nigerians who are visa applicants to the UK. Would that become more strict? Are you going to scale back post-Brexit? And there's also the issue of economy. And of course, the work that the UK does in Nigeria. Are you also scaling back on those?
Well, I think post-Brexit, if anything, we're going to be more open to migration from other parts of the world. We recognise Nigerians have an enormous amount to contribute. We have 200,000, I think, Nigerians in the diaspora in the UK, and they're making an enormously important contribution. Everything from the Square Mile in the city, and I met the chairman yesterday of Nigerians on the Square Mile. That's the group who work in the city as lawyers and financial experts, some amazing talent, right through to our National Health Service, where we have Nigerian doctors, nurses, the health workers. We recognise that talent, and we want more of it post-Brexit. So again, I see that as an opportunity. On the trading front, we're a very important trading partner for Nigeria. Our trade and investment relationship is big. It's 4.2 billion. But we want to double that by 2030, and we want to widen out from oil and gas. Not surprisingly, that's the foundation of our trade and investment relationship with companies like Shell. But the creative industries and tech and fintech is where we want to go. London, Cambridge, and your equivalent of that here in Lagos, which I visited yesterday, that's the future of many economies. And we see that as a very strong partnership between the UK and Nigeria.
Well, let me ask another question about Nigeria-Britain relationship. Yesterday, members of the Islamic movement of Nigeria went to protest at the British High Commission in Abuja over the continued detention of Zakzaki, the leader of that movement. And they are accusing Britain of some kind of complicity in the continued detention of Zakzaki. And they are asking questions, specific questions, that why are British officials like Tony Blair, coming to Nigeria, meeting with the governor of Kaduna State, and not bringing up the issue of Zakzaki. They're asking what is happening. And I can even quote from a report over that incident as reported by the Daily Sun today on page 4.
Well, I wasn't in Abuja yesterday. I was here, but I was aware of the protest. We support peaceful protest in Nigeria and everywhere, and it's absolutely people's right to protest, and it's extremely important that the government allows that to happen without reacting violently. So that's our message, and that continues to be our message. In terms of Tony Blair, who's, of course, no longer a member of our government, I know. He was here, and I did meet him. He was here because one of his many enterprises he works on is support for governance activities in Africa, and his team are working Kaduna State and at central government level, and providing technical advice and support. And it's a very welcome intervention. I wouldn't expect him to speak on behalf of the British government. That's our responsibility. But his visit here, as I understand it, was very much welcomed by the government in terms of the technical support his team is providing. Well,
you recently pledged again the commitment of the British government to support Nigeria to ensure its areas of priority, to achieve sustainable long-term relationship between the two countries continue. And one of those areas is the anti-corruption fight. You said, the government is committed to help Nigeria with this, and this has been said repeatedly. But what sort of support are you giving the Nigerian government in the areas, for instance, repatriation of funds? What exactly is going on? Can you tell us?
That is one of the main areas of collaboration. It's a very important area for the Nigerian, quite understandably. So if illicit funds have ended up in the UK fraudulently, it is our duty and responsibility to ensure that those funds are returned to the Nigerian government. It's quite a long and complicated process, to identify, to trace them, to ensure we have the evidence base. But we have already returned. I cannot remember the exact amount, but I know there's been a substantial fund returned, and that continues. And in the second Buhari term, we've already recommitted to that process. It's also important for Nigeria to play its part. It needs to have the necessary legal frameworks in place, so both sides need to work together to ensure those funds can be repatriated. In terms of corruption more generally, I understand that the second-term Buhari government will recommit to its 3 high-level priorities of security, anti-corruption, and the economy. And that's good. But it needs to become more granular, and frankly, corruption within government itself needs to be tackled. This is not just an issue for the private sector. The government itself needs to hold its own officials to account when they transgress, and we want to do everything we can to support that in terms of the anti-corruption institutions, in terms of training, and as you said, in terms of repatriation of illicit funds.
Well, let me ask something lighter. I know that, the British government is already preparing for the Queen's birthday.
Indeed, tonight.
It's tonight?
It's tonight here in
Lagos. But her birthday is on April 21.
Well,
or is it in June? Why do you have 2 birthdays for the Queen?
It's very confusing, I know. Yes. So she has her actual birthday and then her official birthday. So as embassies, missions around the world, high commissions, we can choose to either do it in April, around that 2-week window, 1 week before or 1 week after the official birthday, April the 21st, the actual birthday, and then there's a similar window in June. What we've decided to do this year is to have the Lagos one in April and the Abuja one in June. But the theme for both of them, and this is something I've been very strongly in support of, is around celebration of youth and creativity. it's been the most inspiring thing for me being here is to see the incredible talent, creative talent in Nigeria. I've just come from Zimbabwe and I was impressed with the talent there, but in Nigeria it's on a different level. So my visit, as I mentioned yesterday, to your equivalent of Silicon Valley, Yakuba, it was just so inspiring to see these young people with their amazing, exciting startup ideas. So we want to celebrate that creativity, from fashion to music to the arts to applying fintech to solving practical problems. So, for example, one entrepreneur we're sponsoring, we've had 6 in the UK who are being teamed up with tech hubs in the UK. And one of the young entrepreneurs has a brilliant idea to support young mothers with affordable maternal health packs and text messages to tell them when they should take their medication. It's just a really good example where you can apply technology to solve a real life problem, but do it for people in an affordable way. So you have so much of this talent. And the QBP tonight, the Queen's Birthday Party, is about celebrating that.
I can only imagine it must be very difficult to get the Queen a birthday gift. If you had to give the Queen a gift, what would it be?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I mean, it's her birthday.
Yeah, it was a really good point. I think she... And it's, yeah, what do you give the woman who's just...
the sovereign.
The sovereign, exactly. If I was given, what would I give her as a present from Nigeria? We just hosted an exhibition of Nigerian female artists, and I bought an amazing painting, and I would select a painting for her from one of those young female artists, and I hope she would hang it with pride in Buckingham Palace.
Indeed.
Well, you talked about democracy. Oh,
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
You talked about democracy in action in Britain. We just went through a process where we've not concluded that process. You were in Nigeria during the elections.
During the elections, yeah.
I'd like to know what you think of that process and what you think we possibly can do differently to further deepen the process.
Well, democracy is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It's been a journey for us, and we haven't completed our process yet, and we've got a live example of democracy playing out. I think for these elections, there were some strides made forward, but I think overall, to be honest, there was probably a feeling of a bit of disappointment after the excitement of the previous election with the first civilian transfer of power. But this time, there was a lower turnout, perhaps just not that sense of enthusiasm. But there was some important progress made. In particular, actually, coming back to civil society and youth, we've supported a number of civil society organisations like YIAGA, who supported the Not Too Young to Run campaign. There wasn't this time the chance for a youthful candidate to come forward, but I think it laid the foundations for a different kind of democracy. So my expectation is the next election is going to look quite different, particularly if we prepare early and support them to come behind perhaps one candidate, give them the backing they need. Ideally, a young female candidate would be even better. And at the end of the day, the old boys are dying out. You know, they're in their 70s now, and this is the time to start preparing for a different kind of generational change in Nigeria. So that was one positive in this election, and I want us to build on that.
Well, let me ask you about a very important issue here. April 14, this year will make it 5 years since the Chibok girls were abducted. The initial international traction it gained seems to have waned. I know the British government pledged support and was helping,
yes.
But are you still supporting the government to bring back the remaining girls? What exactly are you doing? Or have you left it to the fate of the Nigerian government to do?
No, well, I'm glad you raised this issue because it's extremely worrying and the situation in the north looks very serious. The Boko Haram has split into essentially these 2 different factions now, with Islamic State West Africa, if anything, looking a bit more serious. On the Chibok girls themselves, our military came in specifically to support the Nigerian government in those endeavours and played its part along with many other partners. We're still here. We want to try and do more, and it's one of the conversations we want to have with the new government when it settles in, what more support they might want from us, not just on the military side, but potentially on trying to support a political process in the north, and of course on the development side. We're a huge donor there. We're spending £120 million a year on the humanitarian side. We would rather spend that rather than just saving lives, enabling those lives to go back to their livelihoods, to return to their villages, and for people to restart. I visited one of the IDP camps recently, and it's depressing, you know, to see all that talent, Nigerians, you know, who want to go home, frankly. So we, in the second Buhari term, we really want to help to play our part to try and bring this to a resolution for those girls to come home.
Well, I mean, let's go back to the Queen's birthday. You have the program in Abuja today. You have the
Lagos today.
Lagos today, Abuja in June. I know many Nigerians listening, to us will say, well, they too probably would like to attend the birthday, but I know it can be an open party. But what kind of people are you inviting, apart from the young people? How do you, some people who may want to attend the one in June. The Queen is very popular in the Commonwealth.
The Queen's popular everywhere. And I think this party will be really different and quite an event to be at. So those who will be there will definitely be talking about it. It's really hard for us drawing up the guest list. It's one of our biggest challenges, particularly this year, because I wanted to shift, actually, the profile of our guests to include more youthful people, more creative people. So that does mean we have to do a little bit of culling of the guest list each year to refresh. There's just a space constraint on how many people we can have. But because we can't have everyone at the Queen's birthday party, we have a number of other events. So last week, my deputy Lord Bofields hosted a youth party, specifically for the youth, to start a conversation about what they want to see change in politics, in tech, in a whole range of issues. So these events are important. They're our flagship events, but of course throughout the year we're hosting a number of conversations on difficult topics as well, in terms of sexual violence against women, LGBT issues. So we try to use our residences as a safe space to explore and open conversations and give people the confidence then to go out with courage and confidence to raise some of these more difficult issues that are challenging for Nigerians to talk about. But the QBP this year is going to be fabulous, and it'll be, some of it will be online. We're showcasing, as I said, the best talent, including fashion and film. David Ademeya's film, where the film that he directed, showcasing his mother on a horse and her Nigerian regalia, that was shown at the British Film Institute. That's going to be shown on a loop. So it's going to be absolutely fabulous. There's going to be wonderful music, young Nigerian bands playing. So I'm really looking forward to it. So sorry to those who can't attend this year. But congratulations to those who are coming.
Great. Many thanks for coming on the show this morning.
Thank you.
Long live the Queen, they say.
Absolutely.
Long live the Queen.
No, I think she is something that brings us all together. An absolutely amazing woman who has served her country so well. And she loves Nigeria, by the way. I've spoken to her fairly recently, and she said, you are very lucky to be serving as my representative in Nigeria. And I do feel very lucky.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.